Years ago, I had some hats for our farm embroidered on the side from dawn to done. The idea was, man, we get up, we get after it, and we don't stop until the job is done. That's where my mind went when I began to read the first verse, the first portion of the letter to Smyrna from Jesus Christ. He said, he is the first and he is the last. He is from eternity through eternity. Welcome to the sermon studio. I'm Kevin Bell. Let's dive into the letter from Jesus to Smyrna today. In Revelation chapter 2, from verses 8 to 11, you see a letter from Jesus Christ to this literal church in Smyrna. The letter says this, "And unto the angel of the church of Smyrna write, These things saith the first and the last, which was dead and is alive. I know thy works, and tribulation, and poverty, but thou art rich. And I know the blasphemy of them which say they are Jews, and are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. Fear none of those things which thou shalt suffer. Behold, the devil shall cast some of you into prison, that ye may be tried. And ye shall have tribulation 10 days. Be thou faithful unto death, and I will give thee a crown of life. He that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. He that overcometh shall not be hurt of the second death." Man, I love the very beginning of this. Jesus, he says that he's the first and he's the last, that he was dead and he is alive. I love this because this letter is prophetical in nature too. He's writing to a church in Smyrna that was going to face some real serious persecution. If you view these letters like I do, but if you view these letters as time periods throughout history, so like literal churches, types of churches, and time periods throughout history, then you can see that this letter would be written to the martyred church, to a group of people who are going to lose their lives for the gospel. And I love how Jesus even says, like, he's the first, last, but I love how he even introduces himself as the one who was dead, but is alive, almost like as if he's saying, I've been where you're going, and I came out victorious, and I have the power over death, the power over the grave. I have the power over your death, power over your grave. And I can almost see Jesus like saying this in a way that tries to reassure the people in this church and throughout this age that he understands and he has power over it. He says, I was dead, but I'm alive now. This church in Smyrna was in a city that was kind of a rival city of Ephesus. There were about 200,000 people there in this city, and they had some strict laws against Christianity, and they would have some strict laws against Christianity, which was going to cause a lot of martyrdom, a lot of people to lose their life. I like in verse 9 where it says, I know thy works. Jesus is like, I know like the things that you do. Like, I get it, I see it. He says, I know your work. He says, I know your tribulation. He says, I know your poverty. Let me remind you of something, just in case anybody needed to hear this. Your bank account doesn't reflect whether or not you are a solid, faithful Christian. That's not the telltale sign that somebody is a successful Christian. I'm reminded of a friend of mine specifically that went and planted an underground church in China, and I remember hearing stories of like officials coming in and taking things from the church. Like when they found out that there was a church going on, they would come in and they would take stuff from that church. And you quickly realize, like, it doesn't mean that you're a successful church just because you have stuff, because you have material things and wealth and things like that. And that the same principle kind of rolls into our personal lives. Even here, let's just say there were Christians in this city, and the Lord says, like, I know your poverty. Maybe they were already facing uh, like a light persecution, just simply because they were Christians, and maybe they were having things taken from them or whatever. It doesn't matter. Like, Jesus, like, I see your poverty, but you're rich. And another way to think of it is suffering makes the poorest Christian rich. You can ask Jacob after he wrestled with the angel of the Lord all night and he suffered, but he came out richer. Ask those 3 Hebrew boys who were thrown in a fiery furnace. They came out richer. Ask Daniel, who walked around in a den of lions. Ask him how he came out of that. He came out of that richer. Ask Stephen, who was being stoned, and he looks up and he sees the Lord standing at the right hand of the Father. He was richer because he got to experience, and those other examples, they got to experience just the power, the presence of the Lord through their suffering and through their pain. So even Jesus in this letter, he's just like, I know your poverty, listen, but thou art rich. And he even says, I know the blasphemy of them which say they're Jews and are not, but are of the synagogue of Satan. I just want to say this. There are a lot of, let's call them fakers. There's a lot of fakers, pretenders in a lot of churches. There are a lot of pretenders probably in the church that you go to. Hopefully you've got this solid, faithful, everybody is saved, everybody's on fire. But the reality is that there are pretenders in every church. And when Jesus comes back one day, when the rapture takes place and the church is taken up out here, there's going to be a lot of pretenders that are left behind. So don't be a pretender. If you know somebody that is not where they should be, and maybe they're going through the motions, or they're just so religious in their motions, man, maybe those are the people that this week you need to go to and be like, man, let's start a Bible study. We need to talk. Maybe we could just pray together before the next service, before our next Bible study or whatever. Get to know somebody, and then get to the heart of where people are. Don't just walk out and be pretender. Just if God puts people on your heart, those are people that we need to go pursue. So Jesus even understands that there are pretenders. And then in verse 10, we get more to the heart. He says, fear none of those things which thou shalt suffer. And fear not kind of idea. But there's another key word in here that says shall. He says, fear none of those things which thou shalt suffer. And then he says, the devil shall cast some of you into prison. And he says, ye shall have tribulations for 10 days. And so there's prophetical statements being made by Jesus right here. But then he starts off by saying, fear not. Don't fear. God is greater than your suffering. God is greater than the trials. God is greater than the tribulation. Yeah, you're in poverty, but you're rich, and you've got me. This is the only letter that Jesus doesn't challenge anything that they're doing. This is just encouragement. This is just him loving on and blessing them. He says that you're going to have a period of tribulation. He says 10 days. There's a lot of different takes on what that 10 days mean. I'm not going to go through that in this video. You can do a little bit of digging on what that 10-day means, but nobody's ultimately going to know. Let's just say that. But one of the things that we can clearly see is that there's going to be some intense suffering that's going to have an expiration on it. There's a time period put on it. It's a measured period by God that he gives, but he makes it clear that it's not going to be endless. But he says at the end of that, like, be faithful unto death. Unto death. Some of these people are going to seal their testimonies in their own lifeblood, and he is challenging them to be faithful unto death. He doesn't say be faithful until like relief comes. He says be faithful even if it costs you everything, even if it costs you your blood, your life. And he says, and I will give thee the crown of life. This is the martyr's crown. And he promised this to people who were faithful unto death. He promised them a reward. And so even Jesus like clearly is making known here that there is going to be an end to the tribulation, but there is a crown that's coming that endures, that's eternal, and that thing is going to far outlive any of the tribulation and the persecution that you go through in this church. And there are so many promises of God in the Word that give you and I those same promises. He says, I will give thee the crown of life. It reminds me of Polycarp. Polycarp was one of the martyrs that I believe were being prophesied about in this letter. He was a disciple of John, the one who wrote this down. He was a pastor there in Smyrna, and he is quoted at death through some eyewitnesses. He's quoted when they were taking his life as saying, 86 years have I served him, and he hath done me no wrong. How then can I blaspheme my king who saved me? And then they burned him alive. And then eyewitnesses there attest to the fact that he took death calmly, prayerfully, and courageously. He was found faithful even unto death. That last verse there says, he that hath an ear, let him hear what the Spirit saith unto the churches. I believe that God has a word for you and I in our church today, because of the letter that was written to this literal church. Back then, I believe that the Lord has some encouragement for us through this letter. He says, he that overcometh shall not be hurt of the second death. So he's talking about Christians. He's talking about people who have overcome by faith. And this second death that he's talking about here is when death and hell are cast into the lake of fire, which you see in Revelation expounded on just a little bit more. So here's my encouragement to you. Fear not. Be found faithful unto death. Make sure that you are living and staying true to your Lord. Make sure that your faith is like triumphant, that you have overcoming faith. And we know that we can, because Jesus is over here like, I'm the first, I'm the last, I was dead, and I'm alive now. I know what you're going through. I'll get you through anything because I have all power. I have the keys of death and hell. I have the keys. I have the power. I have the authority, and you're my child. And so let's rest in that. Let's fear not. God bless y'all.